Welcome to Season 4 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sarah F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sarah F. Hathaway.
Hello and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 136, Season 4, Episode 12. Just going to do a quick intro today because we have a long interview. Johnny Jackson and I got together and we were talking about socialism and just, what it is and what that means and some of the historical references and things like that. So it's a great episode today. I want to let you know that the audiobook giveaway for Battle for the South is over. Everybody that, entered that contest, go over to Facebook and check in your private messages because some of y'all just liked my page or liked the post. So I send a private message to you and sometimes they get lost over there. So head on over there, check that out. Maybe you got one of the private messages and you're a winner. If not, we're going to just start picking other winners from just kind of what happens in social media and hand some of those out for free if they don't get claimed up. So head on over there and check that out. Last week in Battle for the South, Erica was down at the hospital. They came back and she had to go out and call for volunteers to go back in there and help those people out. This week, we're going to catch back up with Master Sergeant Bennet. Really fun chapter. But as he's driving up to Dallas, he's kind of reflecting on what's happened with the government. And so here to talk to us today is Johnny Jackson, like I already mentioned. We're going to be talking about socialism and why that is just not the preferred way for our country to be headed right now. So it's going to be a great episode. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into Battle for the South. Chapter 12. Master Sergeant Bennet was more than happy to watch old Austin fading away in the rearview mirror. The dust flew up behind him, fading the small town even faster. His mind drifted with the small fragments of dirt filling the air. He was glad his parents were in the free zone, but knew he could not visit. He had chosen a life with the military over family a long time ago. He wondered why he had not gone to them after the Great Quake, but the federal forces needed help, and he thought his place was there. He shook his head at himself in the rearview mirror. He hadn't shaved in days, and his normal mustache was hidden in the shadow of a full beard. How had he been so stupid, he thought to himself. He should have seen the writing on the wall. Before the Great Quake, there was already a call to exchange freedom for socialism. He should have known this would be the perfect opportunity. He should have protested when the Constitution was thrown out, and he helped to imprison innocent people because they had lost their home. The guilt he felt inside had led him to Erica. She had pulled him out of a loyal stupor as he attempted to pull her into the order. She had made him listen and think for himself again. Another wave of guilt blasted through him. I should have talked to her. She trusted me, he scolded himself. Are we going to stop for gas, sir? Corporal Smith questioned. Of course, Bennet snapped, trying to make it seem like he was conscious of the gaslight that had come up on the dash and the federal gassing station up ahead. As they pulled up to the pump, a young private approached the vehicle. Papers and orders, he requested. The master sergeant handed him the documents, and after looking at them, the young private snapped to attention and saluted the master sergeant. Welcome, Master Sergeant, sir, the young man declared. At ease, Private, Bennet replied. Fill her up. The men got out of the Jeep to use the facilities and changed back into their uniforms, while the private went to fill the vehicle and wash the windows. Did a bus headed for Dallas already come through here? Bennet asked. Yes, sir, the private responded. Private First Class Moore and Corporal McClintock got off the bus. Couple of great guys, he chuckled to himself. Where did they go? Bennet asked, full of concern. They boarded with a private citizen. They said their mission was critical, and the bus was too slow, the private informed him. Let's go, boys, Bennet snapped, distraught by this change of plans. He had figured on arriving well ahead of Dexter and Johnny, and having the trap all set before they got there. All the boys would have to do is play their role. Now they would know the lay of the land first. Once Smith and Shaver were back in the Jeep, Master Sergeant Bennet put the pedal to the metal, and an hour later they were arriving in Dallas. The city of Dallas had received its own share of devastation, but had been rebuilt into the southern jewel of the new United States. It gleamed gorgeously in the sun. Windmills turned like giant pinwheels, producing power rapidly. The city had its own gates, and the Master Sergeant barely stopped before he was let through. A Federal Forces major slowed his vehicle on the other side. "Please come with me, Master Sergeant," the major requested. Curious about his request, the Master Sergeant parked the vehicle and followed the major into his tiny office. "Major Reese Jarvis," the major announced, extending his hand. "Master Sergeant Patrick Bennet," Bennet responded, shaking his hand. "Yes, I know who you are," the major replied cockily. "Still hunting that refugee scum?" "I'm sorry, sir, what are you referring to?" Bennet replied coolly. "Erica and Vince Moore?" "You're still hunting them, aren't you?" the major questioned directly. "There's no need for secrecy. The Federal Forces have been alerted to her treachery. We are all in this together." Oh, shit, Bennet thought. He hadn't been in communication with Major Burgess for days. Bennett's hesitation amused the major. "You mercs are an audacious bunch. You think you could pull off their capture without the aid of the Federal Forces? But don't worry, you will have the assistance of all the forces in Dallas. If she makes it that far, which I doubt," the major concluded arrogantly. Bennet decided to play along. "That will certainly make my job much easier. Thank you, sir." "Your job will be really easy, because there is no way she will get into my city. I have it locked down tighter than Fort Knox," the major boasted. "I bet you're right," Bennet jested with him. "But just in case, I would like to set a trap where Nancy Fisher used to be employed." "You know she's not in the city any longer?" the major questioned. "Of course. But Erica doesn't, and she'll be headed there," Bennet informed him. The major nodded. "I'll have a squad meet you at the textile factory." "Very good, thank you, sir," Bennet responded. His head swirled. If the feds captured them, they'll be dead for sure, he panicked, but showed no outward sign. The major led him back to his jeep. "Good luck," the major responded as he closed the jeep door. "Major," Bennet caught his attention before he left. "Yes, Master Sergeant," he replied. "Did you see a private first class and a corporal come through here today?" Bennet wondered. "No, can't say that I have. They are not in Dallas. Nothing gets through my gates without strict documentation." Bennet chuckled at the man's arrogance as he drove the jeep into the city. The streets gleamed with a dust-free shine and people toiled in neighborhood gardens. He watched the simplicity of life going on before his eyes and wondered why he had never been content with a life like that. As he pulled up to the textile plant, Dex and Johnny were waiting for him outside. He wondered where Dexter had sent Trucker away to, but he could tell the young man was infuriated. Dexter's face was in Bennett's as soon as the jeep came to a halt. "Where's my grandma, Bennet?" Dexter seethed. "Don't forget I'm your superior officer," Bennet barked, jumping out of the jeep and towering over the young man. "Where's my fucking grandmother?" Dexter screamed. "Dexter, you better stow that attitude right now. You will address me properly, son," Bennet insisted, snatching the boy by his collar. "Where is she, sir?" Dexter quieted, humbled by Bennett's fury. "She's in Las Vegas." "Matthew Tweed had her recalled," Bennet admitted. "You knew?" Dexter looked at him with tears in his eyes. "You knew all the time she wasn't here?" The look of sadness in Dexter's eyes almost caused Bennet to lie and say he had just found out, but he couldn't do that. "Yes, Dex, I knew," he said flatly. "I was afraid you would tell your mom and dad if you made contact." Dexter realized the logic of his decision, but he had been so excited to see his grandma again after all these years. Anger, frustration, and disappointment built inside of him. Wrenching his shirt out of Bennett's hands, he shouted out, "Fuck!" into the air, just as a Federal Forces transport pulled into the textile factory parking lot. Dexter's eyes snapped back to Master Sergeant Bennet. "Don't worry, they're here to help us set a trap," Bennet responded. "For my mom and dad?" Dexter spun in his rage. "They'll fucking kill them, Bennet!" The discussion was over as the Federal soldiers exited the vehicle with their weapons pointed squarely at the merc soldiers. Bennett's hand went for his sidearm. "Don't do it, Bennet," Major Jarvis announced as he approached. "You are outmanned, outgunned, and outstrategized." Bennet stood with Smith, Shaver, Dex, and Johnny in disbelief as their guns were taken from them. They were forced to their knees in a line in front of the major. "Imagine my luck," the major boasted to his soldiers. "Do you know who we have here? This is Master Sergeant Patrick Bennet of the Mercenary Army, Federal Forces traitor and friend to the #1 federal fugitives Vince and Erica Moore." The major spun around in his victory lap. "And these two slippery bastards who somehow slimed their way through our gate are a sight to behold." He stood behind Dexter. "This is Private First Class Dexter Moore, son of the federal fugitives Vince and Erica Moore. But this man is the catch of the day. This man is Corporal Johnny McClintock, son of General McClintock of the Mercenary Army, arrested for grand treason against the United States of America. The same General McClintock who sits in a cell in Kansas City awaiting his execution." "You fucking bastards!" Johnny yelled, springing to his feet to attack the major. His efforts earned him a jab to the back of his head with the butt of a soldier's gun. Johnny stammered, falling to the ground. The soldiers kicked him back into the lineup. "Don't worry, Mr. McClintock. You won't be held guilty for the sins of your father, but you will spend the rest of your life as a refugee," the major jested as he spun on his heels again. "Load them up, boys." The men were forced to their feet at gunpoint. Dexter positioned himself next to the major and looked over at him jovially. He started skipping and sang out, "Happy days are here again." Then he whistled a little tune. The soldiers were confused by his actions and slightly amused as well. Suddenly, Trucker came flying out of nowhere and ripped the man with his gun on Dexter to the ground. Dexter seized the moment, grabbed the soldier's gun, and smashed the other soldier on the other side of him in the head with the butt of the gun. The man's head split like a melon as Dex wheeled and shot the soldier with his gun on Bennet. A shot was fired at Trucker as Dexter sank a bullet into the shooter's chest. Chaos overwhelmed the scene for the next few minutes. Shots were fired and men struggled for supremacy. The federal soldiers fell one by one until the last one standing, Major Jarvis, stood fearfully in front of Bennet. Bennet pulled the trigger. Jarvis slumped down and died on top of Corporal Shaver's lifeless body. Bennet knew he had to rally his team quickly and figure out what to do next. "Everyone okay?" he questioned. There were positive responses. "Then we have to get the hell out of here. Everyone in the Jeep," he commanded. He made sure to one-arm hug Dexter on the way to the Jeep. "Thank God for that dog of yours, son," Bennet said affectionately. Bennet felt that he really did love this boy like family. He did not regret for 1 minute calling him son and knew he would always be there for Dexter. Dexter looked at him with blank eyes. His mind whirled with uncertainty. Master Sergeant Bennet was definitely not expecting this sudden turn of events as the new socialistic government goes into full swing. Dexter is not a happy camper. You know, he's got a lot running through his head, and it's just setting up for a very interesting situation, so you have to keep tuning in to see what happens there. But today, Johnny Jacks is back with us, and you know, I've had so much fun getting to know Johnny. His book, Absolute Anarchy, is one of my new go-to manuals. Absolutely love his book. And there's so much great information on the internet that he has to support his book. Wonderful work. He's a product of World War II. He was born in Alabama in 1944, 5 months before D-Day, to semi-literate sharecropper parents. He lived self-reliantly, off-grid, off-city water, without indoor plumbing, and without assistance from a welfare state, which of course didn't exist in those days. On his 17th birthday, Johnny enlisted in the Air Force, later transferring to the Army, where he became a Special Forces soldier, a Green Beret, and began a career serving on a Special Forces A-team in Europe, Asia, Central America, including an assignment to Special Forces A Team 102 in Vietnam in 1967 and 1968. He has lived or spent extended amounts of time in third world areas such as Asia, Central and South America, and Africa, interfacing with people who live on the edge of survival. And definitely people that know what it's like to live under different types of governments. After retiring from the Army in 1982, he worked for several government agencies over the next 25 years in significant positions involving high-level national security and emergency preparedness programs. These positions provided him with knowledge of continuity of government and continuity of operations at the senior level of national leadership. This combination of off-grid, self-reliant living, guerrilla warfare expertise, and national security policy gives him a unique insight into today's individual and group prepper survival needs and requirements. Johnny wrote Absolute Anarchy, The Prepper's Guide to Surviving the Coming Collapse. Absolute Anarchy is available on Amazon in paper and Kindle versions and is the most comprehensive prepper information resource available today, and I have to absolutely agree 100%. The book's website, AbsoluteAnarchyBook.com, contains a gateway to a large set of web links related to each chapter that vastly expands upon the book's instructional information. The first 4 chapters in the supplemental reading are posted on that website. Johnny, I got to update this bio. Johnny has just finished Islam Rising. It's a great book that really starts delving into the world. It's a new dystopian world. And so I'm excited to pick that up and check it out when I actually get a moment to read something that isn't my own work. But you can get a hold of Johnny at AbsoluteAnarchyBook.com. That's AbsoluteAnarchyBook.com. Before I bring Johnny on, we're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsor. Today, I'm very excited to announce a special free gift to all of our subscribers that have an IRA, 401k, or retirement account. Today, we are giving away a free hardback copy of Jim Rickard's latest book, The New Case for Gold, a $26 value. I can personally tell you that this is a must-read. This free book is brought to you by Advantage Gold and is written by Jim Rickards. For those of you who don't know Jim Rickards, he is the nation's most vocal and intelligent proponent of the gold standard. Not to mention, he is a national security advisor, Pentagon insider, and financial warfare expert. Before writing this book, Jim wrote 2 New York Times best-selling books, The Death of Money and Currency Wars. Inside The New Case for Gold, Jim turns his attention to the everyday American and how he can use gold, the #1 asset in a currency crisis, to not only survive, but thrive in the coming dollar fallout. This book could change your life. This is what you will learn when you read it. How to protect your IRA, 401k, or retirement account from the coming dollar collapse. The single greatest buy indicator ever devised for gold. A step-by-step walkthrough of one of Jim's most powerful CIA prediction techniques. The Chinese gold warfare plan that could bring US dollar holders to their knees. If you're making the #1 gold buying mistake, and much, much, much more. The time to buy gold is now, and this book is the perfect guide to help you protect your retirement from a pending financial crisis. Jim says, when the collapse happens, it's going to happen quickly. You won't see it coming. There won't be time to run out and buy gold, and it probably will not even be available at that stage. This hardback book is free to you today, but you have to hurry. Books are limited. We only have a limited number of copies to give away, and these books will go fast. If you have an IRA, 401k, or retirement account and want to learn how you can protect your financial future from a pending dollar collapse, then this will be the best gift you ever receive. To claim your free book, go to www.authorSarahFhathaway.com/newsletter and click on the link for this week's blog. Again, to claim your free book, to learn how you can protect your financial future from a pending dollar collapse, go to www.authorSarahFhathaway.com/newsletter. That's www.authorSarahFhathaway.com/newsletter. Hi, and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. Today, I am back with Johnny Jacks, author of Absolute Anarchy and Islam Rising. Johnny, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure, Sarah. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Well, I love having our conversations, and today we got a good one going on because we're going to be talking a little bit of socialism. But before we do that, why don't you go ahead and just give a short introduction? You've been on my show before, but you got a new book out that you want to talk about, so let's go ahead and tell everybody about that.
Okay. I'll give you a little bit of background, just a couple of sentences here to just kind of give you my expertise in this arena. I lived self-reliantly with a self-reliant lifestyle back in the late 40s and early 50s. My dad was a sharecropper. We were just hanging on the edge of survival, and that was normal everyday life for us.
Right.
22 years in the military, 15 of those were in special forces. I was a Green Beret, spent time in Vietnam, Europe, Central and South America, and Turkey. 25 years in significant positions of national security, emergency preparedness, and I've lived or spent extensive time on every continent but Antarctica. I'm hoping to get there one of these days.
Nice.
And I've just lived among peoples who exist on the edge of survival in Central and South America, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and Africa. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of where I come from and
just how blessed we are here.
Well, hopefully, sometimes I feel a little embarrassed in talking about these things because I've done so much and I've been so many places that I'm afraid people will think I'm bragging, but I really have lived this lifestyle and learned these things and just trying to pass them on. But as far as my writing experience is concerned, I've written a lot of nonfiction stuff. I did that when I was working in government. A lot of policy documentation and engineering studies, that sort of thing. And I put that expertise into writing Absolute Anarchy, which is my nonfiction book. It's a prepper study guide.
It is a beautiful manual. Yes, it is. It's a gorgeous book.
That's one that I'll brag about. I tell people that it is the most comprehensive prepper study guide ever written, and to prove it, I put quite a bit of it on the internet. Absolute Anarchy has its own website, absoluteanarchybook.com, and there's a lot of free stuff there.
One of the biggest pickups that I got from Absolute Anarchy was the community focus, and it was a really big eye-opener because everybody kind of thinks, me, my own, I'm protecting me, my own. Well, your own is not going to work in a long-term survival situation. That's not realistic.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so the community focus was awesome, and it just kind of launched me into, let's get these community prepared. Let's start making an effort to really get these communities prepared. So,
well, something else, Sarah. One thing I did. Well, I tell you, I throw a little something here on Islam Rising. Islam Rising is not a prepper book disguised as a novel. It contains. Well, I'll get into it a little bit here, but just as we were talking about Absolute Anarchy, and you mentioned that group survival, in Islam Rising, I have embedded the means, an overview, and the means of maximizing your chances of survival. In other words, there's prepper stuff in it, but it's not a prepper novel.
It's not like a how-to manual with the story.
No, it's not.
Right.
But embedded in an very entertaining way, I've embedded as sort of a minor subplot, how to maximize your chances to survive through group cooperation. Islam Rising, it's a pre-collapse novel. It contains tragedy, it contains romance, it has complex characters with complicated relationships.
Does the collapse happen during the book?
No. As a matter of fact, it leads right up to it.
Oh, you're just going to leave us hanging, huh? I get so much feedback about that. How could you do that to us? How could you do that to us? I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. I wrote too much, and I had to sort of cut it short.
Yep.
But by I say cut it short. It's a sort of a long novel. Not too long, but it's sort of just about right. But I was starting to get into the too long, dragging it out a little too long. So,
and readers nowadays, they don't want that. They want it, they don't want to be overwhelmed when they pick a book up to begin with. So there's a fine balance there. And I'm like, I got to give you guys something that you're really going to like and think is manageable. But on the same note, I got to bring the story, and that just happened to be where it ended, so.
Well, it's kind of funny. I feel the same way. So I understand. I'm a reader too, so I agree with that.
Uh-huh.
And that's one of the reasons I said, well, let me just and actually, whenever I went back and looked at the manuscript just before publishing it, doing the final run through, I realized that I did the right thing.
Yeah.
Because of the I don't want to spoil this for anybody, but the thing that was going on with the protagonist was resolved. Let's just put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
So by leaving it there,
but at least you came to some kind of a conclusion, right?
It did. It came to the best one for that book, for Islam Rising, and I also wrote it in with dialogue. There's very, very little description, right. And my view of it is this: if you're telling a story, it's sort of like flying along at 30,000 feet, looking down, trying to tell people what everything on the ground looks like, as opposed to putting the reader in a car with Joe, Mo, and Larry, and Joe's driving and Mo's complaining to him, you missed the doggone turn, and he's yelling back, no, I didn't. They come to a dead end at 50 miles an hour or something like that,
Yeah, that's,
so, they're passing through cornfields and, and a deer runs out in front of them or something like that. So now you get when you use dialogue, and several people have told me it reads like a movie. Right. When you use dialogue, and I'm getting way off topic here, but I get real excited about how I have done this, because there's so many people that come back to me and just giving me the feedback, telling me how great it is.
With my books, Day After Disaster, I wrote just as a hobby project, and I never thought about publishing it. It was just kind of something I did, right? And as I went on, I was very intimidated about using dialogue back then. And as I went on, it just became more and more fluid to just fall in and out of the dialogue so fluently, where you're describing and it's only like a sentence of description that comes in between all this massive dialogue. So that's one of the reasons why I went back. I just, it's at the editor right now. I just went back and redid Day After Disaster, totally re-edited that book, because I wanted to bring that, the car feeling, instead of just telling you what's going on, that now you're submerged in it. And I'm really happy with that, how that turned out. And I really think that's, a mark of a really quality writer, because it's definitely a skill that has to be developed, because you really need to be in your characters' heads to bring that to light.
Yeah, and I tell you, if anyone out there is a writer and they're listening to this, I picked this up from Dwight Swain's Techniques of the Selling Writer. So Techniques of the Selling Writer has been around for decades. That's how good it is. And the other one I would recommend is Writing with Emotion, Tension, and Conflict. And I forgot St. John. I've forgotten her first name, but the Writing with Emotion, Tension, and Conflict. You pick those two up, and you'll see what we're talking about here. Yeah. Get your reader down into the story. There we go. Now you can edit.
So we've got a big interview to do today, because we've got a big topic, so we can't burn too much time talking about author stuff. Even though lots of the fans like to hear. They like to get inside our heads and know what's going on in there. I don't know why. Trust me, I don't even know what's going on in there. So. Yeah, let me throw in just one or two more sentences here, because I've missed them. With this Islam Rising, there's an Islamic element that becomes more prominent as the series goes on. The series is Patriots and Infidels, and I'm writing the second one now. I'm about halfway through it, but there is an Islamic element, and it runs parallel in Islam Rising.
And the closer we get into books 2 and 3 and 4, and I've got a 4-book series, the more I merge those two. Mm-hmm. The Islamic element, the other element. I don't want to give anything away. I don't want to spoil it.
Right. We're just going to have to go check it out. We're going to have to go check it out. That's for sure.
Well, all I got to do is just go on Amazon and type in John H. Axe, Jacks, and it'll bring it up.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk a little bit of socialism. It's obviously a big topic nowadays. We have many people, mostly of the younger generation, that believe that socialism is our answers to saving our country. So I'm going to work with you a little bit because somebody's got to play the devil's advocate on this topic so we can understand what's going on here. So what is socialism? How does it work?
What is socialism? It depends upon who you ask in most cases. And by the way, the supplemental read for Absolute Anarchy explains everything that we're going to talk about today. Gets into a lot of details. Mm-hmm. And it is free on the website.
Okay.
AbsoluteAnarchyBook.com. Most people conflate the innocuous definition of socialism with the social results or the perceived social results of societies living under socialist economic systems. Because the term socialism is, if you just define it down to its basic component, is a very innocuous term. And there are three basic, let's put it like this, there are three basic economic models. And socialism is just one of them. The other two are capitalism and fascism. Right. And actually, socialism has several forms, including Marxism and communism. All three of them require the state or the collective to own all property and commercial enterprise. Marxism, as the main idea, is to move citizens towards a classless society. That was what Marx advocated. Communism is a system of collective ownership of property. You don't own it yourself. You own property with other people, supposedly. Yeah. The thing is, socialism precludes, and regardless of the form, if you look at the pure form of it, it precludes private ownership of property and right to engage in commercial enterprise, meaning that that's the meaning of the base model.
Right.
To understand, now this is just, I tell you what, let's go into what pure socialism is. The way that I define pure socialism is that the state owns all property and the individual is not allowed to engage in commercial enterprise or acquire wealth. The state owns housing, factories, service industries, transportation systems, sales outlets, everything.
Right.
Now, this is the pure definition. Individuals are not allowed to own a home, produce a product, operate a service, can't have a car wash, a hair parlor, a bicycle repair shop, lawn service, none of that sort of thing.
Is I've done lots of interviews with Doug Hogan on the FEMA laws that are written, the executive orders that are written in case of natural disaster, and sounds a lot like this. Like, we just take everything and we'll make sure you guys are all set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
well, the individual can't own an airline, a rail service, or taxi, or bus company, and you can't open a store of any sort. So this is pure. We're just talking about the pure form.
Right.
Everyone is a government employee, and there's no such thing as being out of work or receiving unemployment compensation. They don't have an unemployment. Well, the unemployment office is a place you go to get employment.
Right?
They'll find you a job. You will have to go do something.
This is where you are stationed.
And welfare as we now have it in Western civilization, it just does not exist under socialism.
Right.
Now,
wouldn't it be argued that, like, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan. I like Star Trek, and like the world there that they created in this fictional place, like, is kind of that way, because There's, nobody's homeless. Everybody's fed. Everybody's, taken care of.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, that exists because they had replicators and could like make whatever you needed. So I don't know how you could achieve that without having some kind of major technology like that. So
Yeah.
anyway, I
Well,
digress.
no, that's okay. You make me think when you come up with those things.
Right.
Now, capitalism. Now, to go, I know that your topic is socialism, but if you don't compare it to capitalism and fascism, then you sort of you get left with a few blanks. Capitalism. Now, the pure definition is there is no government. The individual can own property and engage in commercial enterprise without government interference. That means you'd have no license requirements, no minimum wage, no environmental impact studies, no government regulations to comply with of any kind. If you wanted a policeman to come to your house when a burglar shows up, you have to pay a security company for its services.
Yeah.
If you wanted a fireman to come when your house caught on fire, you'd have to pay a fire protection service company to provide that.
Right.
That's just under pure capitalism, pure fascism. The individual can own property, engage in commercial enterprise, but only as prescribed by a centralized government headed by a dictator. Everything the individual does must support the state. That is the dictator and the ruling class. The fascist ideology. It was the first to implement a progressive tax on capital. That's how our federal income tax works right now. The more you make, the more you pay.
Right.
As a higher percentage as you go into the different brackets. The state provides for the working class by way of minimum wage, social health care, state-run labor unions, that sort of thing. And it was Mussolini's the one that came up with that idea. And I think he may have picked it up from someone else. I'm taxing my brain right now to try to go back in history and find out how he came up with it. But Benito Mussolini came up with it, and it was advanced by Hitler. Hitler used it.
Right. Yeah.
President Franklin Delano Roosevelt used it.
Roosevelt. It could be argued. I was going to say it could be argued that that's what we are living under right now. It's just the government is your dictator. Your dictator, basically. The Congress is your dictator instead of an individual.
Yeah. You know what? You're absolutely right about that. And somewhere along here, I've got some notes on that. I'll bring that up again in a little bit.
Okay. So let's go back to socialism. Who really revolutionized the socialism ideas? Like, who made this people to go, yeah, this is a great idea? Who's behind this?
Golly, we're going back in history quite a ways.
Because Stalin pushed for the communism,
let me just give
obviously.
You this. Yeah. Let me just give you a little side note or two here on this.
Okay.
The thing that makes socialism sound good. In the past, and in some places now, extremely poor people are the ones that become, I'm going to call it brainwashed with the concept of a socialist state. Right. And in some cases, especially in Western Europe, and Western and Eastern Europe, over into Asia, there have been people in the past that people starving to death, kids living on the streets, that sort of thing. Some very bad conditions for those on the lower rungs of society that, when presented with socialism, they embraced it because they thought they would have equality with everybody else, and they were in very dire straits in a lot of cases. And just that's sort of a side note.
Right.
There was a
That was
Frenchman.
Germany, right? Post World War One, they were dealing with massive inflation and things like that, and that's why they
That
decided it was a good idea.
Yeah, but actually it goes back further than that in Germany. Now, the reason for the post World War One was due to and my brain's running all over the place now. The Treaty of Versailles after World War One required Germany to pay reparations to the Allied countries, and so they stayed poor. People were starving to death. It was really bad for them. So that is why they embraced fascism under Hitler. But we go back to 1796. I mean, the Manifesto of the Equals was presented by a political journalist, Francois Babeuf, Babeuf, and I think the F is not pronounced. But he was one of the key supporters and organizers within the French Revolution.
Oh yeah.
The people were starving to death in France at the end of the 18th century in the late 1700s, and so he was one of those revolutionaries that helped bring about the French Revolution, and that his manifesto supported an egalitarian system where everybody's equal. Where all property and labor are shared equally. Well, now, for all those masses of people that were starving to death, that sounded pretty good to them.
Right.
And then Karl Marx came along. He was a German philosopher, considered the father of communism and socialism. And I think he picked up on Babeuf on his Manifesto of the Equals, and he wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848, about 50 years later. And Marx is most quoted. The thing that he's most quoted for is from each his own according to his ability, and to each according to his needs. And that is the basis for redistribution of wealth. If that sounds familiar to you.
Yeah, it does. Very familiar.
Right now, today in America, we hear people saying, well, rich people have too much and we need to take it from them. We give to those who don't have so much, right. Make everybody equal. So we're seeing that here. Marx's manifesto was a direct attack on capitalism and if I can pronounce this right, bourgeois, upper class, the class warfare. Yeah. In other words, those that were rich were to be hated and to be disposed of, really. And so he instituted class warfare. And like I say, some of that was somewhat justified in that they didn't have a middle class. Middle class was held down because they really did not have in 19th century Europe. Well, 18th and 19th century Europe did not have good capitalism. They really didn't. If they'd had capitalism, they probably wouldn't have had these problems.
Right, because they were coming out of monarchies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The Little Ice Age had just come through, and they were in a lot of warfare. The Irish had found the potato, right? But the French wouldn't eat potatoes. They thought it was like the devil's food. So they were like starving even worse. And the Little Ice Age had wiped out their wine production and everything. So it was definitely a really traumatic time for all those people right about then. So, of course, some new ideas were going to come out of that. Usually need necessitates invention, right? So
there you go. And I don't think Marx really, I don't think he ever imagined that his ideas would develop into an authoritarian system.
Right.
Because on paper, it sounds really good. Sounds great.
Yeah.
But if you go back, you'd asked me earlier how socialism works, and the thing is, it doesn't work.
Right.
It's never worked in the industrialized world.
Well, let's go to what is like the perceived benefits? Why do people like what are the perceived benefits of instituting socialism? We'll start there and then talk about why it actually doesn't work.
Well, there is no benefit as far as I'm concerned. Socialism, it takes away the personal incentive.
Yes.
It destroys the middle class, and it enslaves the working class. What you end up with is the opposite of what the left in America and Europe, Western Europe, thinks that they would get out of socialism. Because what you end up with is no middle class. You have those that are in power, and they reap the benefits of that, living in the big houses and having, all the benefits of a rich person, and everybody else is living down on the lower rungs. Not a lot in the middle.
But the idea is that if we had it that way, that you wouldn't have the rich people anymore, that everybody would be middle class, right? That everybody would have the same amount of food and the same amount of medical care and the same amount of, right? So, I mean, that's like that's the farting rainbows idea, is that everybody would be, brought down to the same rung or brought up.
So let's put it like this. Fidel Castro didn't get his cancer treatment in Cuba. He went to Venezuela. At the time, Venezuela was still doing well. And for anyone that doesn't know, Venezuela. And I was there back in 1970, 71. It was I want to say the richest country in South America. It was very advanced. And right now, people have lost somewhere around 17 to 20 pounds apiece. They're eating garbage. They're fighting in the streets. And it's all due to socialism. Hugo Chavez, he's dead now, and I forgot the name of his second in command there that took over. But they imposed price controls on food. So the people producing food, it costs them more to produce it than they can get out of it because of the price control. So they have a super food shortage now, and people are starving to death there.
Yeah.
But those who are rich and are in the upper class, they're doing pretty good. They don't have any problems.
Basic economics. I mean, that's basic economics of the situation. If you put a price ceiling up, you study that in micro and macroeconomics on what is going to happen if you do that. And usually it's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, usually the best thing is for governments to back out and stay out of it. Unless they're not acting responsibly, they're dumping toxic waste and, hurting millions of people or something of this nature, right? So, I mean.
Well, I'm sorry. Oh, well, you hit upon something because another issue with socialism is that when you get caught up in it, you're usually forced to remain in it. Look at Cuba. Cuba's a good example right now. There are people that risk their lives on inner tube rafts to come 90 miles or so across the Gulf of Mexico to try to get to Florida. And if the Cubans see them leaving, they shoot them. They kill them. Send the patrol boats out and kill them.
Yeah.
East Berlin, when the during the days of the old Soviet Union, the East Berlin was walled off, had minefields, they had guards, and their people risked their lives, and a lot were killed. North Korea is a big one. Yeah,
right now.
Yeah, it's a basket case. People starving to death over there. Just like the other day during the State of the Union by Trump back, it was a couple of weeks ago in January.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good.
That one fellow from North Korea that his legs were amputated. He fell asleep from lack of nutrition. He fell asleep on a train track. Train came along, cut his legs off, and his siblings fed him their ration of food to keep him alive, and they ate dirt. And so there are people today in North Korea who are basically just eating dirt. And I've seen some places where people make mud pies and feed their kids mud pies. So there are places.
That's crazy.
There are places like that. And,
yeah. So you think that I don't know. Well, maybe we're just overly spoiled here, and we don't get enough history or information on what is happening in other areas of the world that these kids would actually believe that socialism is a good idea. But let me play the devil's advocate here, because this is some of the things I hear. This is something I hear a lot. So a lot of people say, we're already a socialist country. We pay taxes for our roads, for fire departments, for police forces, and all these essential programs, for welfare programs and stuff like that, you know. So how would us switching to a fully socialistic government be any different than it is now? Because we already pay for all of those things anyway.
Well, you have to go back and look at those pure definitions. In a capitalist society, you can own property and engage in commercial enterprise. Under socialism, you cannot own property, cannot engage in commercial enterprise. Under fascism, you can own property, and you can engage in commercial enterprise, but you have to do it the way the state tells you. So coming back, so what you have to do is take those pure definitions and adjust them, because there's no such thing as pure capitalism or pure socialism, or pure fascism. I mean, there are combinations of them. So you have to look at your society to see where you stand. And all I would say is that we already have social settlements. The federal government owns about 35 commercial enterprises. They own Amtrak. They own VA hospitals and other VA medical facilities. The Postal Service, federal prison industries. Not just the federal prisons, but federal prison industries where prisoners make things. You got Fannie Mae. You got Freddie Mac. You got the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and those are the things that come to mind right now. There are about 35. FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, is one. Tennessee Valley Authority. And I don't know. I'm surprised that all those popped in my head.
But they don't own McDonald's, they don't own like everything. No. You can still have your mom and pop store, and
but what they do is if McDonald's wants to put a shop in, depending upon where it is, they have to do an environmental impact study, perhaps. And they have to pay for that and have to wait for years to get that approved. Now, I may be a little bit off.
No, you're absolutely right. That, because we wanted to do some projects here, and the government hoops were so astronomical. There's no way, we could even afford to get a yes or a no answer if we could do it. So
and if they control the federal government will control how you go about hiring people and how much you pay them, and if you fire them, there are protections for employees, but the federal government is the one that's controlling it, and that's those kinds of things. And if you had those sorts of things are under the federal government, that should be under state and local government.
Right.
It's okay for the locals to have control, but once you get the federal government involved with things and you try to standardize everything for everybody, then what you end up with is suppressing capitalism, and you end up with something that's more in the line of fascism, and that's what we have today.
I would agree with that 100%.
Well, fascism, you got Obamacare, which is being somewhat gutted right now, but it's still out there. Right. You can be a doctor, and you can own an office, and you can own a hospital, but you can do these things, but you have to play an insurance company, but you have to play the game. I'm sorry.
And that's
I need another sip of water.
I try to explain to people that, so our rights come from God and nature's law. That's where human
Right.
rights come from in the United States of America. And
Right.
a lot of people are like, oh, well, the government. Well, no, we give our rights that we are given from God and nature to the government. And so when we say, okay, we need a driver's license to make sure everybody's safe on the road, you just gave up your right to drive a vehicle to the government in the assurance that they were going to handle it responsibly and make sure that everybody knew how to drive a vehicle so we're not out there mashing into each other. So, like, everybody thinks their rights come from the government, but that is not true. Your rights come from
Well,
God and from nature's law, and you give
let,
them to the government.
let me disagree with you to some degree, because you hit on a major issue. In the beginning, the day that the Constitution was ratified, we had a capitalist system.
Right.
Very little government involvement, and our rights do. Our rights do come from God. I mean, that's there's no doubt about that. Nature's God. But now the government, more and more, just little by little, the federal government has imposed itself upon us. You've got like I was saying, the Obamacare. You got the Environmental Protection Agency that tells you if you have a little swampy piece of land, you want to build something on it, they may keep you from doing that, and charge you $10,000 a day if you do. To make you take whatever it is you built on that little swampy place because somebody in a government office thinks that there's some critter there that you may be killing off. You got the FDA, Federal Drug Administration, that will tell you whether or not you can take a certain medication because they may or may not have completely approved it. You got the Department of Education that is telling local schools what they have to serve in the cafeteria. They're telling they're telling schools what they have to teach.
Which I don't know how they did that, because I know that they got into a lot of business control because of interstate commerce, but I don't know how they got into the education system.
Well, Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education, so it hasn't been around. It's not part of the original Constitution
at all.
Department of Energy is one of the others. So, I don't know. Something else is talking about the federal firearms license requirement. You have to have a license to sell firearms and ammunition. So so the government's controlling. But how did that come along? The bottom line is the government controls how you do business and is deeply involved in regulating your personal life. So the question is, how did we go from an almost purely capitalist system with state control to federal government control? And just a little side note, it's a long read and it's online, but AbsoluteAnarchyBook.com has that chapter, that supplemental read. The whole thing is in there that will tell you how this. I'll try to give you a little bit of the highlights because, we're getting on in time here.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
What made America great? And I asked that question every song. What made America great? And the answer is capitalism.
Yep.
That's what you can boil it down to. And rather than get off on the tangent,
and maybe personal responsibility, because you can own your own business, you can be responsible for your business, but the thoughts were also there for, I'm going to employ these people at my business, and I want to make sure that these people are taken care of because they're my employees. And we've kind of lost a lot of that with our as businesses grew in size and things like that, where they decided to pull out of America and, go to other countries and help and things like that. And they really lost employee focus. And so that makes a lot of people go, well, why should we believe in capitalism? They're just going to make their money, leave us behind in squalor because somebody else will work for $1 less,
I can tell you what happened. The progressive movement happened. The progressive movement started in 1890, and why? The end of the 19th century saw the American Revolution in full swing.
Right.
Boy, it was going gangbusters. But it that was capitalism. But it created some social problems. You had child labor sweatshops. You had a lack of worker
unsafe
protection.
work environments where all the women were killed in the fire, and
unfair labor practices, unfair, well, even unconscionable conditions that needed to be addressed.
Right, they were working like 7 days a week, and yeah.
So now this was not capitalism. A lot of people, when I get in a conversation with people, say, "Well, that's capitalism." No, that's not capitalism. That is a result of capitalism. It's not capitalism itself. So those need to be addressed. But what happened was there were name escapes me right now, but in 1890s there was some guy, a reporter that started bringing these things to light. Began the progressive movement.
Yeah.
And then in 1895, and they were able to convince Congress in 1895 to pass the Sherman Antitrust Act, because so many businesses were being consolidated and controlled as monopolies.
Right.
And that was part of the problem too. So, but I think it was Grover Cleveland, I think, was president. He didn't do anything about it. Then Garfield was elected. He lasted about 2 months, and he was assassinated, and then Teddy Roosevelt took over.
Yep.
Teddy Roosevelt used the Sherman Antitrust Act to bust monopolies, the trust buster. He was called the trust buster.
Right, yeah.
And so he liked that. Now, that was the first major legislation that where the Congress passed off to the executive branch the power to regulate commercial enterprise. That was the first one.
Yep.
Teddy Roosevelt. FDR was like his long-lost cousin. But Teddy Roosevelt then asked for more laws to help him to do more things. And that progressive movement sounded like a great thing.
And the people gave the government the right to do that, right? We gave up our rights at that point, thinking that everything would be better. And, it was in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of that was changed. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, so once things were fixed, do you think they were going to give those rights back to the companies or to the people?
There you go. And see, Roosevelt believed he believed that strong corporations were good for America. He believed in capitalism, but he also believed that corporate behavior must be watched. It was up to him to ensure that corporate greed didn't get out of hand.
Yeah, he was trying to maintain capitalism by making sure
but
that
he wanted
one
to control
person, couldn't have a monopoly over them all. There would be multiple companies to fight with each other and keep it, to keep that capitalistic energy flowing, basically.
Yeah, but there was still that mentality. That's where the mentality started of the government is supposed to control what takes place. Yeah, and regardless of the reasons for having done it, for child labor shops and unfair labor practices, that sort of thing, and the monopolies. Even if it was done for a good reason, still it started going too far. Now the progressive movement, it had good intentions, and it seized the political arena at the beginning of the 20th century. Teddy Roosevelt, he worked with Congress to pass anti-monopolistic trust-busting laws. They passed more once they got past the Sherman Antitrust Act. And that was the beginning of fascism in America. It wasn't called fascism at that time, but it's doubtful that Teddy Roosevelt saw it as an overexpansion of the executive branch of government, but rather, I guess, an expedient means to address the problems of the time. In accordance with his own personal desires.
Right.
But then let me pull out a couple of notes here because my memory's not all that good. Roosevelt, another progressive, followed along, and I'm going to pass some of these presidents to it, just give you a few. Woodrow Wilson came along, and he had Congress. He got Congress to give him the Federal Reserve, Federal Trade Commission, federal income tax, and the 8-hour workday. And he was considered an intellectual, and he actually later on I saw some place here sometime back when I was doing my research for Absolute Anarchy, chapter 18, where he regretted having creating the Federal Reserve. Warren Harding came along, and he did a lot of good, but he screwed up. He cut government spending in half. He decreased taxes, and if you can imagine cutting it in half today, cutting government in half.
That'd be awesome.
Wages went up like crazy. Prices decreased. Unemployment completely dissolved. It just went away.
Yeah.
The tax revenues actually flowed into the government.
Right.
A lot more.
Because more people working, more people paying taxes.
There you go. It tripled. But what he did is he signed one of the first national welfare programs in the country's history, the Shepherd-Towner Maternity and Infancy Act. And what they did, that provided matching federal funds for medical services to pregnant women and children. Now, this goes back to something you brought up a little bit earlier. How did this all come about? And try to bring me back to that here in a minute. Harding also pushed for federal government intrusion into agriculture. He signing laws that exempted farm cooperatives from antitrust efforts. He regulated meatpacking. He offered farm credits. And that resulted in farmers borrowing money to expand at a time when they were producing more food than demand for it. So if they were he actually encouraged too much farming. And then to rectify that problem, he supported more laws to regulate farming. And that trend continues today even. FDR, he's one of the big culprits. He and Johnson. FDR, let me get this list out here. First of all, he was a socialist. He was fifth cousin to Teddy Roosevelt. And FDR came along at the time of the Great Depression of the 1930s, and that was brought about by the collapse, the stock market collapse in '29. The economy was actually starting to come back up when FDR got out and said, "Oh, I'm going to be your savior. I'm going to save the country." And he talked a nice, he sounded really, really great. So everybody voted for him. They voted for him, put him in office 4 times. He didn't live through the fourth. He didn't complete the fourth one, but fourth term in office. But he was. Everybody believed him. But he was a socialist, and as a matter of fact, he started many socialist programs at the beginning of his first term, or in his first term, such that the Supreme Court actually ruled against him in a lot of what he did. But then he was in long enough to pack the court. So he packed the court with progressives who started going along with his program. So he actually, just like in the last 8 years, like with Obama, things just plodded along. So he prolonged everybody's suffering. He was just simply popular because of the propaganda machine that deceived the public. It's just that simple, just the way it is now. Yep. Ignorance is bliss, I guess. But he established.
Everybody's all set, so what do we care? We'll just let it keep going. Oh, it won't get any worse than this. It won't get any worse than this.
Yeah. He established over 100 government agencies, and he did a lot of without the approval of Congress. Huh. And it makes me wonder if he's related to Obama. So I don't know. But
right.
So sorry about it. You can edit that out if you want to. Anyway, but with over 100 agencies. So what he did is he sucked the money out of the economy that was needed to run. He sucked it out to run the executive branch, and he absorbed all that money. the investment capital. And that left the capitalists, the business owners, the commercial enterprise in the private sector without the money that they needed to establish new business or expand. His actions, I believe, they were a major factor that kept the economy from rebounding after the stock market crash of '29. If he hadn't done all of the things that he did, I think the economy would have come back much stronger than it did. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, because there's a lot of big corporations nowadays, and I've already expressed that one of the feelings is that our corporations aren't really taking care of us. It's not like Hershey, where they built hospitals to take care of the people that are working for them and stuff like that. And there's some people that have these exorbitant lifestyles with 9 houses and all these different countries, where, and then we have veterans, homeless people by mad numbers on the street. People are getting arrested for feeding them right now and things like that. I mean, and so if the corporations or these wealthy people aren't voluntarily giving back to the communities that built them, so the argument is, why shouldn't they be forced to do that?
Well, they are forced to, in that they pay the taxes. And I'm going to say rich people, not corporations. See, corporations, this is such a fallacy that corporations pay taxes, because I've had 2 corporations myself, so it's small sub-S corps. And I have somebody that I want to hire. Well, when I hire them, I have a formula that I plug in, and I've got to pay so much of their Social Security taxes. I've got to pay so much towards their unemployment compensation tax. I've got to pay all of these things. And then my corporation has the money the profit I make comes to me as a personal tax.
As an income, right?
It comes to me. Well, the profits from the corporation goes to the individual that owns the stock in the company. So you're personally paying the taxes on this. I'm talking about sub-S. I'm not talking about the other larger corporations. So what happens is I got to figure, well, okay, if I'm going to have to pay this amount of tax and all this amount of tax, I got to pay for this stuff and this stuff. Then I've had people that work for me, kind of going on with it every day. I've had people that work for me as consultants, and they paid their own taxes, and I would pay them like $30 an hour. I'm just using some hypotheticals here. Right. And then others would say, well, no, I want to work as an employee, and I want the insurance. I want you to pay me for my insurance, for my part of the Social Security taxes, unemployment compensation tax, and I want you to give me 2 weeks or 3 weeks of paid leave. Right. Well, I plug all that stuff in and say, okay, well, instead of $30 an hour, now I can pay you $17 an hour. Well, I don't want to. And it might have been $23. Right? It might have been $23 an hour. So what I'm saying is, corporations, no matter how big or how small they are, they don't pay the taxes. What they do is that they cut the wages of the people they hire so that they can actually pay the people. Because if you could pay them without all of this other stuff that government makes you pay, then you could actually give them more money that they can stick in their pockets and go out and buy their own insurance and pay for their own 401ks or whatever.
Right. That's why Apple was just able to give back like $2,000 to all their employees, basically, is because with that tax cut, they don't have to take as much out of their pocket for those employees.
There you go.
That makes sense.
So and we're going back to FDR. He started the Social Security Act, and now it's bankrupt, by the way. They're supposed to be the Social Security Trust Fund.
It's not supposed to be able to be bankrupt, basically. I mean, everybody that supposedly is receiving from it paid into it, kind of thing. So that is kind of a conundrum.
Yeah. Well, they're supposed to be, oh gosh, I've forgotten how much it is. It's several $1 trillion right now in the Social Security Trust Fund. Because back in Reagan's day, Reagan had made an agreement with Congress that they would raise the Social Security tax for the baby boomers that are coming along right now. Congress, that's great. We're going to do that. And then we'll have all this money in the Social Security Trust Fund. Well, what they did is every year they would take the money out of the Social Security Trust Fund and use it to pay for the social welfare programs. And so now that they need it, they say, well, there are $2 trillion, there, I don't know, $2 or $7 trillion, whatever it is, in the Social Security Trust Fund. And they say, no, there are a bunch of IOUs in there. Yeah, but the federal government's backed it. Yeah, but the federal government's got to go out and borrow the money and put it in one pot and pull it out of that pot and stick it in the Social Security Trust Fund pot in order to make the payment. So indirectly, just about all of your Social Security, not all, but all of that extra money that was supposed to be in the Social Security Trust Fund to offset the baby boomers now is not there. They have to go borrow money now to make it up every month.
The next two generations that came after the boomers were smaller, so it's not like we can pay for. Yeah.
So the bottom line is, government doesn't do us a whole heck of a lot of good when they start to becoming involved with commercial enterprise and social welfare. Now, going to social welfare, Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, he took over when Kennedy was assassinated, and he started the Great Society program, and these were a set of laws that he got Congress to pass that fundamentally took all of the state and local social welfare programs and put them under the control of the federal government. And it's indirect control. If a person goes to a welfare office of any kind, no matter what it is, for food stamps or housing or whatever it is, they do not see a federal employee. The person that's there is going to be usually a county employee, maybe a city employee.
Right,
county or city, county mostly. So why is that not a federal employee? Well, the Constitution doesn't allow the federal government to come into the state and set up these federal welfare system that is strictly federal welfare. Maybe some exceptions with things like the Bureau of Indian Affairs may have some things they do on native lands or something, that sort of thing. Yeah. But not for the majority of, not just generally speaking for all the states. So what they did is they passed this law that again gave the executive branch the power to regulate, and so the federal government has to go down and dip into all. That's the reason for all these increases in taxes. The increases in taxes, they have to increase taxes so that they can pay for all of these over 2 million federal employees in 1,000 government agencies to administer all of this stuff. And, probably it could be, other than the military, it could probably be cut down to about 20% of what it is right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why do we have all of these problems? The federal government controls what's going on at the state and local level. And they do that by saying, okay, they go down, and I'm reaching down, way down now towards the floor, and I'm pulling up all this money out of the states and the local communities. Pull this money out and stick it in the federal coffers. They waste a heck of a lot of it in just administering the programs. And then they say to the states, okay, you want money for schools, you want money for the food stamp program, you want money for this, you want money for that, roads, whatever. Okay, you do exactly what we tell you to, and we'll give you these billions of dollars. So the governors of the state, no state has to accept any of that money. But if the governments of the states don't accept it, then the people who are ignorant of how things take place will say, oh, well, you're not taking this free money. It's not free money. It's money that's been taken from you to begin with, and money that's borrowed that your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or your descendants somewhere along the line has to pay back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
so now, fascism. Are you starting to get the picture now on fascism, how we are now a fascist government?
For sure.
That a government that controls our rights.
Yeah, so everybody who's out there complaining about capitalism, well, we don't even live in a capitalistic society basically anymore. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter came along, and he added some to this, and I have a whole list of things here we can't go through, but you get the main idea.
So basically,
And
let me lay
mhm.
out this one. So under
Okay.
socialism, the idea is that everybody's supposed to be equal. So why won't that ever be true? Like, okay, so why bust everybody, all the snowflakes out there, sorry, but bust their rainbows and explain why this will never be true if they haven't got the message already.
Yeah, well, human nature, because
Yep.
what you want to do with your life and what I want to do with my life and what that other person over there wants to do with their life are all completely different. Now, I may want to live just, I just may want to drive my truck and my dump truck and, punch a clock, get a six-pack, and watch ball games on weekends and not worry about anything.
Right.
Somebody else may want to start a lawn care business and expand it throughout the entire state and make millions of dollars or something,
Right.
So, or somebody might want to start a dump truck company. So people have different desires in life. They have different ambitions. So if you have socialism, it takes away your ambition. It takes away the desire to innovate. I've been thinking about a kind of a prepper toilet kind of a thing. So I'm thinking, well, if I could get this thing manufactured, I could probably make $1 million on it,
Right.
Well, if everybody's equal, then where do you get the incentive to do better for yourself or to invent new things to advance the culture?
Yes.
It just doesn't exist.
Yeah. So that
And,
so people might say, well, you'd still have that desire anyway, even if you were only making, the same amount. So you're making 40,000, they're making 40,000, and you have a desire to create this product. So you would do it anyway. That's what they would say. And it's like,
well,
I don't know that
yeah,
you would.
well, the thing about it is, what has happened to those people, those millions and millions of Americans that have ended up in multiple generations living off welfare?
Right.
What is their incentive in life? What kind of what's
have
happened
more
to their
kids
character?
so you can get more money.
Yeah, I just saw a report recently of some school teacher that talked to a girl about doing well and not, doing well in school in some inner city place. Is that do well so you can go to college or trade school, whatever, and do better. She said, well, why should I do that? All I got to do is have babies and not get welfare. And she was serious. That was her ambition in life, was to go out and have babies at 14 and get on the welfare system and not have to work.
Get a bigger check.
Yeah. And then what happens is this. Eventually, it fails. We're over $20 trillion in debt right now.
Yeah.
And it's not going to stop. Well, I'll tell you, read chapter 18, and that's the anarchy.
Yeah, I've read that one.
And there are other things too. Over half of the people in this country, immigrants, are on the welfare system. They're on the dole. So, that's another element and not necessarily legal. Illegals are getting it indirectly because they come in, they have babies, and then they get on the welfare system, and the babies are an American citizen. So the mom and dad are the ones with you got a 2-day-old baby or 2-year-old baby or whatever. The parents are the ones that are getting the money for the kid, or whatever. Did I say money or the benefits, right, whatever they may be.
So I could argue that Germany, at the beginning, even though they were more of a fascist leaning, but they were a lot socialism too. So Germany had a lot of innovation and stuff when Hitler was first there. He did a lot of things with automobiles and rockets and space technology, medical technology. So I could say that's an example of a socialistic government that was having innovation and was kind of prospering on the same level as American capitalism. So, how would you respond to that one?
Although he called his party the Nationalist Socialist Party, Nazi
Right.
Party, he actually used fascism. I think of Schindler's List. So you remember the movie, the book, Schindler's List?
Yeah,
Schindler
I know
was,
it, but I was young and my mom
well,
didn't let me watch
I tell you,
things like that.
this is a prime example of how things worked in Nazi Germany. Schindler was a German that he was an entrepreneur, businessman. He saw how with Hitler how he could make a dollar, and so the short story is he took a group of Jews that were destined for the death camps.
Right.
And he convinced some German to allow him to use this factory. I think the factory may have been owned by a Jew. And convinced someone to allow him to use these people for slave labor to make pots and pans. And he kept those people, and he became attached to them, and he actually saved their lives. And it was his list of people. In other words, the Schindler's List was a list of the Jews that worked in his camp. Well, he was selling those pots and pans. He ended up saving those people. I mean, of course, the movie was called Schindler. Well, the book was called Schindler's List, and then they made a movie. And that was fascism. That's a prime example of how fascism worked. Even though it was slave labor, you could have actually had employees that you were paying also. It still works that way. But it wasn't a true socialist. Nazi Germany was not
Volkswagen
socialist.
and things like that. Didn't the government actually own Volkswagen?
I'm not sure. I don't want to answer that. I think that
that is one of the only examples that I could come up with where maybe socialism got close to what do you have any examples of any socialistic countries that have created the amount of innovation and prosperity that capitalism created here in the United States?
The thing that comes to mind when you mention that, I think about the Soviet Union and the Chinese, of course, and the Russians right now.
Yeah.
What they do is they make their way into our computers. They put their spies over here in our industry. They take our stuff and they take it back and use it for themselves. I don't think that they really innovate much of anything.
Yeah, and Japan used to do
to be
that
honest
same
with you,
thing
it's just like they stole our plans for the atomic bomb. If you look at their airplanes look very similar to our airplanes. Our military. I'm talking about military. Now I'm sure they may have some innovation somewhere along the way, but for the most part, they steal other people's ideas, their intellectual property, and they make use of that. And you can even take the AK-47, the Kalashnikov rifle.
Yeah.
It was actually a German invention that the Russians took after World War II. They brought a model or two of it back. It was the Nazis were in the process of trying to make an automatic rifle, an individual, the individual soldier's weapon, because they were getting their butts kicked by the M1 Garand. And,
the Garand.
They were using bolt action rifles. So they Kalashnikov got credit for it, but he actually just took something that the Germans invented and just improved upon it. That's all he did. So to answer your question, I cannot think of innovations, and I'm sure there are some out there in socialist countries, but I can't think of any.
Right. I couldn't either. That was the best I could do was, because the Nazi Party was technically, like you say, the Nationalist Socialist Party. So maybe they got kind of close, but it was just like you say, it was just the whole system was just applied differently and more that fascist style, which is kind of
Yeah,
what
and
we're
then
sitting at, right?
Nazi Germany was it was fascist. It wasn't pure. It wasn't socialist. Not like
Right.
the old Soviet Union or Cuba or Venezuela or any of those countries. And you'd ask me about sharing the wealth, and I'd say yes, we need to share the wealth, but we need to do it as the way that America first began, through capitalism,
You know what?
capitalism, churches, private
Yeah.
social welfare organizations.
Whether people want to realize this or not, everybody thinks Americans are greedy and yada yada. But America actually pays more money in charity every year than we do in taxes, and that is money that we give freely for causes that we believe in. And
Well,
that amount actually trumps
yeah.
our taxes, our tax base.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
It's something to be proud of, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. But see, the thing is, my memories go back to about 1948. I was born in January of '44, so my memories go back to when I was maybe 4 years old. Could have been younger, I don't know. But my dad was a sharecropper, and we lived without electricity, without houses. Getting the water out of the well, milking the cows,
Right.
straining it, putting the milk down in the well to keep it cool, actually getting the cream off the top, and all that sort of thing. And we had some problems. I started first grade of school living in an old slave house, and so we had some problems at one time. We lived there for about 1.5 years, 2 years, I think, and we moved to another place, and my dad traded the car for a tractor, and the tractor caught on fire and burned up, and that sort of thing. Well, neighbors came around and they helped with the crops, until we could get through gathering the crops for that year.
Yeah.
And
People.
They brought food. They brought
People power.
Oh, yeah, people power. The neighbors helped out. And they brought their tractors over and they plowed the land and ran the hay balers and that sort of thing for us. So,
do you think that population increase has been one of the major drivers? Like, would you blame it more on population increase or technology, the lack of just the lack of community, of social caring for one another, of that drawing away to more of an individual level and where you don't give?
Yeah, that brings on a couple of thoughts. One is back in another age, another life I lived. I recall having done a term paper on world population growth, and I can see the results of some of it now. The world population is spiking.
Yeah.
And especially in our so-called third world countries.
Yep.
So that is creating pressure. Now, what is happening is that Western civilization, the industrialized countries, are now having to absorb this excess from all of those third world countries because they're coming our way.
And we helped to create it because we could grow so much food and stuff. We could give them more, which helped them boom their populations.
Yeah. I would have to go. My memories tell me that when I did this paper, it was way back. It seemed like India and the United States had about the same populations at that time.
Yeah.
And now India has over 1 billion people,
yeah,
and we have like 230 million or something. 330
yeah, they're
million,
on track to overtake China even in terms of people.
And I don't know. There was a second thing that thought just went through my. You'll have to ask me the question again, so I can.
Well, no, I was just
for me to remember.
Would you blame it more on technology, like because everybody's kind of drawn away into their, computers and stuff like that, and so if your neighbor is kind of suffering, well, what do you care? You're on Facebook, you're on doing this, doing that, and you don't really put your head up out of your phone to look and go, hey, that person might need some help.
There may be something to that, but I would contribute. We were talking about world population growth as being one of the problems. The other problem is a change in the mentality of the psyche. of the American people.
Uh-huh.
When just going back to into last year, when Congress tried to eliminate this, Obamacare. It was to replace it. What was the term they used?
To repeal and replace.
Repeal and replace. Yeah, I'm trying to say remove. Repeal and replace Obamacare. And the American people became upset because they were told that all these people are going to suffer if it's repealed.
Right.
Well, there were, according to it was generally accepted that there were 30 million people without health insurance, not health care, but without health insurance before Obamacare. And probably about 20 million of those people were young people that didn't want to have insurance. They didn't want to pay for it. If you look at it now, if they say, well, if you do away with Obamacare, there will be 40 million people without insurance. You'll have the original 20 million or so that have it now, or that didn't have it before, that won't have it again, and then there'll be about another 20 million that won't want it. So actually, by doing away with it, by having brought it on and then doing away with it, and then you have all of those people that can't afford it anymore.
Right.
You know, the price has gone up too high. The premiums have gone up, and from $200 a month to $1,200 a month, and then and you end up having to pay out of your pocket $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 before insurance even kicks in.
Right.
So
yeah.
So, and I got off on a tangent, but here's the main idea. Congress could not repeal it, even if they replaced it, even with a replacement. You know, they couldn't repeal it because why? The mentality of the people of this country is that the government is the answer to the problem.
Uh-huh.
The government has got to take care of this.
Yep.
They look to the government to solve the problem instead of commercial enterprise and churches and neighbors helping neighbors, that sort of thing. So
right.
That's very critical because that is the mentality now. Your rights are coming from government.
Right.
The state no longer has control over the social welfare system. And people's mentality is that the federal government, with its over 2 million employees and probably about another million or so contractors, under 1,000 agencies, departments and agencies, control our lives. And that is being accepted. And the cost is going up. And the cost is not going to, and it's not going to be paid off. The debt is not going to be paid off.
No, and the rights will never come back. Like the more and more rights you give the government, don't ever think the people are going to get them back, because that'll never.
You never do.
Yeah. No.
So what's the ultimate outcome? We
got to remove some of the socialism out of our government and get back to a more capitalistic. Right.
I contend that that's not going to happen. So what's going to happen? You know, let's put it like this: I've got my plan. So
right, yeah. So God forbid my book is going to come true. You know, I would think, because like we saw it happen in Harvey last year. You saw these people come from across the country to help out Americans. That spirit, it revives. So for me, you know, the changing earth might be the trigger that causes people to come back together. So we'll see, right?
Here's the thing: if nothing changes, you can go. I swear, go into. And by the way, I on the website I document everything that I claim in that in chapter 18, that supplemental read. I tell you, I just using logical analysis, not emotional response, but logical analysis. I don't see how this country cannot fail. And when it fails, you're going to have Harveys all over the country. and there will not be other people that could come to save you. Come get in a boat and come up to your door and try to get you.
I agree.
And take you to land and give you a bottle of water and some MREs.
Yeah.
We
got to
focus
on our prepared communities. That's what the focus needs to be. So.
And
all right, Johnny. Well,
believe it or not, one thing. I'm a positive thinker, believe it or not.
Right? Yeah, no, me too. I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
I really want to hope that everything's going to work out.
Yeah.
Good. But in the meantime, let's be prepared in case it doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, awesome. Well, yeah, our interview went a little bit over, but I loved it. Some great information, really exploring the ideas. So thank you so much for coming on and doing it.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, Sarah. It's good being with you, and I look forward to our next visit. And I'm sure there'll be one down the way there.
Thanks so much, Johnny, for coming on the show. Always a pleasure to get to sit down and chit-chat with you. And we could have gone on and on and on forever about this topic. We really just scratched the surface. But lots of great information. I really just wanted to provide, especially the younger generation, with a definition of socialism, what it actually is, how that's actually applied, what that actually looks like, and why it's not really a fun place to live in once it's fully laid out. And chances are you are never getting your freedoms back after that. So definitely a line we want to tread lightly upon. Well, that's all I have for you today. I'm looking forward to the Self-Reliance Expo coming up March 23rd and 24th in Mesquite, Texas. So if you want to get a book signed by me, myself, and I will be out there. I'm bringing my son Fletcher along, and we're going to have a good time. That's March 23rd and 24th in Mesquite, Texas. Well, that's all I've got for you guys this week. So remember, until next time, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sarah for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, and Battle for the South at www.author.sarahfhathaway.com. If you love Sarah's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.